Destiny 2's newest dungeon, Vesper's host, has arrived, and with it comes a new triumph for completing the dungeon by yourself without dying. As I did with Warlord's Ruin in December, I'm here to explain how to solo this entire dungeon across all 3 classes. I'll be going into details about various tips I use when running each encounter, explain my loadouts, and explain my strategies to help you get your solo flawless clear. As I did with my last guide, I've left timestamps in the description below for how I completed each encounter for each character. So head down there if you'd like to skip around, but with that being said, I'm SniperKH, and let's get into the video. So before we get into the guide, I wanted to go over some general tips to consider when running this dungeon. To define what a general tip is, general tips are tips that are helpful regardless of what character you choose to do this run on, or what encounter you are currently on. For the first tip, you'll want to be at tier 10 resilience and match your elemental resistances to those you'll find in the encounter you're doing. With the release of the final shape, Bungie changed the level delta of raids and dungeons, meaning that you're now 5 levels below each encounter. Because of this, enemies will naturally hit harder, so having tier 10 resilience for the constant 30% damage resistance will be crucial. And the elemental resistances will also be nice to have. For the second general tip, I want to recommend that you take this run slowly. While we're back to the usual dungeon encounter format of 1 objective encounter and 2 boss encounters, this run will still take a long time to do, with the average runtime being anywhere between an hour and a half to 2.5 hours, thanks to how tanky the bosses are. Because of that, you should take the fight slow to ensure you don't make mistakes that could cause you to restart your run. Now that the general tips have been covered, let's dive into encounter number 1. For encounter number 1, we're going to start by explaining the loadout I used for my Titan. For starters, the Banner of War build will do you wonders in this encounter thanks to how important single target damage is in regards to the 4 brigs you'll fight and the multitude of invisible snipers. For weapons, I chose to run the Navigator thanks to the synergy its catalyst has with Banner of War, a 1-2 punch shotgun, and a bait and switch grenade launcher. That being said, if you do not have the Navigator's catalyst or you don't want to use it, then replacing Navigator with Witherhoard will be perfect, as Witherhoard is effective thanks to its ease of use for proccing bait and switch, but also for activating concussive reload for the weakening effect on targets. In regards to how I did this encounter, I chose to do the back left section first, then front left section, then back right section. While the order of how you do the sections doesn't matter, I'd highly recommend saving back right for last, as it's the shortest run, which is good to know considering the fact that the final brig you have to kill is incredibly tanky. It will require some time to take down. For buff juggling, I found this to be simple. You'll have way more than enough time to run scanner from the main room of the encounter to any of the 3 sides with time to spare, so you shouldn't stress too much on that front. Furthermore, you can leave both scanner and operator in the terminals on one side and access them on the other 2 sides, so there's no need to try and carry one to the other side. Other than that, my best piece of advice is that you use Banner of War to destroy the first 3 brigs with ease, then you use your bait and switch grenade launcher to kill the 4th. Doing so should make this encounter a breeze. For hunters, I'm also going to recommend you guys run the Prismatic Combination Blow build, as its single target damage is absurd, and pairing Combination Blow when you have 3 stacks with Stylish Executioner will let you nearly one-shot the first 3 brigs. For loadouts, you should consider running Witherhoard, a 1-2 punch shotgun, and a bait and switch grenade launcher. This loadout will serve the same purpose as it did for Titans, with Witherhoard being used to activate bait and switch and concussive reload, the 1-2 punch shotgun enhancing the combination blow melee, and the grenade launcher being used to chunk the final brig down towards the end. Considering the similarities between both the Hunter and Titan loadouts, I don't have any comments to make that I didn't already make for the Titans when running this encounter. So just follow what I said when covering the Titans and this encounter should be a breeze. For the Warlocks, I have a fun and interesting loadout to share with you all. For my pick of the build, I found that the Sunbracers build that dominated throughout the last year of Lightfall worked wonders here, despite the nerf Sunbracers received with the final shape launch. Considering the ad density of this encounter, it made this build feel super smooth to use, and it also allows you to take down the brigs with ease. For weapons, you can use whatever legendary primary you'd like, but I found enjoyment in the Midnight Coup, but just use whichever works best for you. For the secondary, I wanted to recommend the 4th Horseman. The reason for this recommendation is because of how great of a burst damage 4th Horseman is. This weapon allowed me to burst down the brigs and snipers with ease, and thanks to this loadout featuring 1 special weapon, I never had any issues with ammo. For the heavy, once again, a bait and switch grenade launcher will be crucial here thanks to how fast it can burst down the final brig. In regards to this loadout, you want to use your grenades to clear out the ads in this encounter, but the grenades can actually do a wonderful job at taking down the snipers and the brigs, in case you have a Sunbracers rotation to use on them. Otherwise, you want to handle this encounter the same way I've covered for the previous 2 classes. With that out of the way, we move on to the first boss fight of the dungeon, and with that, let's talk about how the Titans will take this boss down. Titans, the loadout I want to share will allow you to defeat this boss in around 3 or 4 phases, which is super helpful. For the build, I highly recommend running the Prismatic Consecration build due to its absurd AoE damage. Considering the fact that this boss breaks down into several mini servitors, Consecration will do amazing damage against the servitors with its AoE explosion. For the loadout, I ran Lost Signal for a boss swap weapon, thanks to it having auto-loading holster and vorpal weapon, a Beer in Action thanks to its ability to pretty much one-shot the exploder shanks in the upper floor and its access to heal clip, and Parasite thanks to its incredible burst damage and its ease of use. In regards to this encounter, I found that it was incredibly easy to build Transcendence thanks to how fast the ads spawn and how many ads spawn in this encounter, so because of that, I'd use Transcendence basically whenever I got it to clear out the ads as fast as possible. When you're teleported up to the upper floor, you should immediately focus the exploder shanks, as if one explodes next to you, it will automatically kill you, so it's essential that they die as soon as possible. Otherwise, the upper floor section is not too problematic at all. For damage, I found myself throwing my normal grenade, then popping Transcendence, then popping my super, then shooting Parasite, then chaining Consecration slams. The reason you want to pop Transcendence early is that it'll give your Parasite shot an additional 10% damage boost alongside the 20% damage boost you'll get from running 3 solar surges. Other than that, this encounter shouldn't be too difficult. Thanks to this build, you can get a comfortable 4 phase, but you can most certainly push for a 3 phase if you feel comfortable doing so. For my hunters, I'd recommend swapping to Arc Hunter for this encounter. For the build, I ran the OG combination blow build with Gathering Storm, as Gathering Storm's damage is ridiculous in this encounter. Furthermore, the jolting capabilities allows this build to not only be amazing for ad clear, but for damage as well. In regards to the loadout, I ran the same loadout as I did on my Titan, with that being Lost Signal, a Beer in Action, and Parasite. Regarding what notes I have for this encounter, it's the same story as for the Titans. Using Combination Blow in combination with the jolting capabilities of this build will keep the threat of ads to a minimum, letting you focus on completing the encounter. As I also mentioned for Titans, you will want to focus the exploder shanks on the upper floor as they will one-shot you otherwise. For damage, I'd pop my super immediately, then fire my Parasite shot, then throw my grenade, and then just spam Lost Signal. Doing this allowed for a pretty easy 4 phase of this boss, though you could go for a 5 phase if you'd like to play it safe. Otherwise, there's not much more to say here. For Warlocks, I did testing with loadouts, and while I hate to admit it, not having an Apotheosis Veil and Star Eater class item is going to make this boss fight take longer than it would otherwise. That being said, I personally do not have that combination on the class item, so I did some testing on other builds and I have found the next best build to use. I tested both Apotheosis Veil and Star Eater on their own to see which one was better, and I found both to do the same amount of damage, but I'm choosing to recommend Star Eater as it allows for an easier damage rotation. In regards to the build that I used, I put it on screen now for you to copy. As was the case for the Titans, I found that my Transcendence uptime was really high in this encounter and that building Transcendence back was really easy, so I basically popped Transcendence the second that I got it back. Otherwise, you'll want to focus the Exploder Shanks up top because they are very lethal, but I've mentioned this already. For damage, I started by using my Cold Snap Grenade, then popping Transcendence, then using my super, then shooting my Parasite shot, then spamming Lost Signal and abilities. My result damage varied with the range of phases being anywhere between 5 to 6 phases to kill the boss, so keep that in mind while you're doing this encounter. Well, we've made it to the final boss, so as always, let's start with the Titans. For Titans, I have a safe loadout that'll lead to an easy 6 to 7 phase kill. Unfortunately, you'll need to have 2 pre-made loadouts, but luckily for my console players, there's plenty of downtime throughout this encounter to give you ample time to switch loadouts. For my build, I ran the Solar Bonk build thanks to its incredible survivability. For my loadout, I ran Midnight Coup for a Grey primary, a Solar Fusion Rifle my secondary to melt the Aatrax copies, and Leviathan's Breath, as Leviathan's Breath will stagger the boss with every shot and does a little over 100,000 damage per shot. For the second loadout, you'll want to swap the primary out for Outbreak Perfected and swap your heavy to anything. The reason for this is because you'll run out of heavy ammo before you take shelter from the boss's nuke attack, so having this second loadout will give you some bonus damage from when you leave the shelter. In regards to the encounter, there were 2 massive issues that I found myself having, the first of which being the Radiation Aatrax copies. Unfortunately, there's no really easy way to deal with these guys. I chose to full send the encounter to get to the damage phase fast, so I wouldn't bother trying to deal with the clones, but just note that doing this strategy means you'll have at least 2 Aatrax clones running around, which could make things a little sketchier. The second issue I was running into was the red room. The red room is by far the hardest of the two rooms to cleanse, and was the room I had most of my close calls in. My recommendation for handling this room is to keep your healing grenade from when you go for operator and scanner, just in case the boss just so happens to not miss a single shot on you. Otherwise, it pays to know the locations of the panels to shoot in order to get through the operator fast. When I was doing my solo, I'd also bank the buffs back into the terminal, though if you're getting close to death doing this, then you can run into the shelter with the nuke and then just locate the necessary ad after shelter phase ends. For damage, I found myself running to the back left of the damage room, as there's a little ledge you can stand on here to avoid the lightning for a bit. On this ledge, I'd pop my rally barricade and use all my Leviathan's Breath ammo on the boss. By the time you've used all your ammo, the clones should be appearing in the middle, so pop your super to kill the glowing one for the nuke, then use the rest of your super on the boss. Once the boss begins the nuke attack, grab the core and run to the shelter. Once you've deposited the orb, use this downtime to swap to the outbreak loadout. Once the shelter opens, return to the ledge, pop your rally barricade and do as much damage as you can until the hatch opens again. Doing this will lead to a comfortable 7 phase, which is a bummer to hear, but this is by far the safest strategy for Titans. For my hunters, I have some rough news. I spent countless hours finding a build that worked wonders, even going as far as to try other builds I saw other creators using in their hunter runs, but I found those builds to be too inconsistent. Because of that, I'm here to recommend running Omnioculus Void Hunter. Now, there's a few important things to mention with this build. For starters, at the time of this video's recording, Tether is disabled in the dungeon due to a bug, but I predict that this won't be the case for much longer. Secondly, the damage numbers that I'm going to be bringing up are entirely speculation, but I have confidence in them being correct. Anywho, I put the build I used on screen so that you can copy it. For my loadout, I ran a fusion rifle in the primary slot, a weapon with access to heal clip in my secondary slot, and Leviathan's Breath for my heavy. I also have a pre-made loadout ready to go, which had Outbreak perfected as per usual. There are two main differences with how this build will play in comparison to the other two classes. For starters, I chose Omnioculus to give the player a safe way to deal with the Atrax clones when grabbing the core in the red and blue rooms, as I was having issues in those rooms in my runs. I'd pop my Omnioculus smoke when I was weak, as it'd be a roughly 7-second long invisibility period in which I'd also have ×3 resist, meaning I'd be taking significantly less damage. Now for the boss, I still use the ledge for damage, but considering the fact that this build has no access to healing like Titans and Warlocks do, you won't be able to stay here for long. I was able to get roughly 5 or 6 Leviathan's Breath shots off before I had to move, so keep that in mind. While moving, just pay attention for where the lightning is, as it can kill you really fast. Otherwise, this fight is still the same as it is for the other classes. Just unload your Leviathan's Breath, then swap to Outbreak when you're out of ammo. I did the calculations, and assuming you're able to hit all crits with ×3 Void Surges and Tether, you'll do about 2.1 million damage, which will net you an 8 phase. But adding in Outbreak, there's potential to lower that to a 7 phase, though I'm not sure if I'd risk it. As underwhelming as it is, this was simply the best and safest loadout I could come up with for hunters. If you have a safer loadout to do this encounter with for hunters, then please sound off in the comments and let me know. Next up, we have Warlocks. For Warlocks, we're going to have you guys go down the healer route. I chose to run Solar Warlock with the build you see on screen now to prioritize staying alive throughout this encounter due to how much damage all the ads do. For loadouts, I found myself running a fusion rifle in the primary slot, a solar SMG in the secondary slot to take advantage of Ember of Empyrean, and Leviathan's Breath in the heavy slot. And as I did with Titans, I had a secondary loadout ready to go, which was identical to the Titan Outbreak loadout. The only difference between the two classes and how they'll be playing this is that you'll want to go about placing your healing turret that will be spawned through Speaker's sight in the middle of the room to try and upkeep restoration ×2 as much as possible. This is especially important in Red Room considering the minimal cover that you'll have to work with. In regards to damage, I went to the same ledge, popped well, then damaged the boss with Leviathan's Breath. If I started to become weak thanks to the puppets, I'd throw my healing turret down and continue with damage. For when the boss does the nuke attack, I'd swap loadouts, but I'd stay around the staircase that leads to the shelter since I didn't have a well. I'd need to play around the staircase. Doing this strategy can net you a 6 phase, but will result in a 7 phase most of the time. Well, that'll wrap it up for the Solo Flawless VESPER'S host guide. If you found it helpful, a like rating would be greatly appreciated, and consider subscribing to the channel for more Destiny 2 content dropping soon. If you'd like to come catch me live, then you can do so over at twitch.tv/SniperKH_, where I'll be live streaming the episode. Otherwise, follow me on my social media platforms linked below to get updates on when I release new content. With that being said, I'm SniperKH, and I'm out. Good luck with gaming.